Well, the world didn't end and the sun still came up yesterday. So I guess Pitt's loss at Wake Forest on Tuesday night was not. No, it was the absolute disaster. It seemed to be. There's no question about it. Can't really spin that one any other way. Tried to give it an extra day to think about it. Talked about some assistant football coaches yesterday, just to put a little space between the game on Tuesday night and today's Morning Pitt. Thought we'd have some different perspective or something. No, it was still a 30-point blowout loss on the road. Put an end to a lot of the momentum that Pitt had. Certainly ended their winning streak where they were, had the best winning streak or the longest winning streak in the ACC, one of the longest in the nation. All those things we talked about on Monday, I think it was. Monday or Tuesday about whether, I guess we talked about it on Monday, of whether Pitt was the most dangerous team in America. A bit of a clickbaity headline there. But look, the Wake Forest game happened. It's time to move on. The Virginia Tech game on Saturday night, huge bounce back opportunity for Pitt. What do the Panthers need to do to bounce back? Let's talk about it here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yes, Thursday, it's the Morning Pitt. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You see the website below, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com and message boards to interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans all day, every day. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. There's been a lot of conversation on the message boards over the last 48 hours in the wake of, well, I hate that I just said that, but the wake of the Wake Forest game. Been a lot, and emotions running all over the place, as you can imagine. People talking about whether the season is lost. The NCAA tournament chances are lost, or they're not. It's just a blip. It's something they can overcome. And there's the responses and the emotions truly run the gamut. And there's a decent chunk of people sitting right in the middle of it all that aren't too extreme one way or the other. But yeah, people are upset, understandably, about a rough loss. An ugly loss. One of the worst losses we've seen in a long time. I don't know if it's the worst loss of the season. I mean, that Duke game at home was pretty demoralizing, but this game, you see stuff. What did I see yesterday? There's something like Wake Forest points per possession was like their highest total ever since Ken Pomeroy started tracking these. I mean, like, Wake Forest truly played the best possible game it could play, and Pitt played something approaching the worst possible game that it could play. And when that happens, you put the two of those together, you end up with a 30-point blowout loss. Not necessarily indicative of who Pitt really is, and I don't think really indicative of who Wake Forest really is, because Wake Forest is not going to be able to play all of its games at home for the rest. I mean, some of their games will be at home for the rest of the regular season. Some of their games will not be at home, and then once they move past the end of the regular season, none of their games will be at home. And as we've seen, Wake Forest is a very different team on the road from what they are at home. Wake Forest is not Pitt's concern any longer, though, lest the two teams run into each other in the ACC tournament. It's time to move on to Virginia Tech, and that's what we're going to talk about here on today's Morning Pitt, the Thursday edition, right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You know what we always ask you to do, though? Like this video and subscribe. So youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. To never miss any of our Pitt video content, whether it's these daily Morning Pitt videos that we do every Monday through Friday, our weekly live stream like we did last night at 8 o'clock. We do it every Wednesday at 8. Our post-game shows like we did after the Wake Forest game on Tuesday night. All the road games, road basketball games, so obviously, that includes neutral court. Any games that are not played at the Peterson Event Center, we do a live post-game show, so we'll have those for the ACC tournament and the NCAA tournament, provided that's where Pitt's path is headed. And I still think it is. But we'll be live after all those games for a post-game show right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We'd love to have you join us because they're a lot of fun. And, even in the losses, it's good to get together and talk about it. So what do they need to do to bounce back? And I don't think there's any deny. I mean, like, you start right off the bat. I mean, Blake Hinson was a problem. Blake Hinson's lack of productivity was a problem in that Wake Forest game. On Tuesday night, 10 points, 3 of 10 shooting from the floor, 1 of 5 from 3. When Blake Hinson only makes 1 3-pointer in a game, I would say Pitt's chances are not very good. Now, the first Wake Forest game, he had 17 points. I think he only had 2 3-pointers. So it's not exactly a death sentence if Blake Hinson's not scoring. To me, a bigger problem with Blake Hinson's play on Tuesday night was the lack of attempts. He ended up with 10 field goal attempts. Only 5 of those were from inside, or only 5 of those were from outside the arc. I think Blake Hinson needs to shoot more than 5 3-pointers per game. I don't think there ever should be a time where Blake Hinson is hesitant to take shots. And we wrote an article about this on Sunday or Monday based on some comments from Jeff Capel after the Louisville game on Saturday night, where he said that, it was like the first practice when Hinson arrived at Pitt, and Hinson had an open look from 3 and passed it up, either passed the ball or tried to drive. And Jeff Capel said, Blake, look, if you've got a look from 3, I want you to take that shot. And he said, I've never had to tell him that again. Well, maybe now would be a good time to remind him that it is important. And I know they were trying to smother Blake Hinson. I know there were a lot of hands in his face. I also know this, when he went inside the arc, he was getting double teamed almost all the time. So at least outside, he was only dealing with one guy. Run a few more screens, try to get him off some screens, try to create at least a little bit of space, and let him fire away. Because the reality is, if you have a game where Blake Hinson attempts 5 3-pointers and Bubu Carrington attempts 9, when Jalen Lowe and Ishmael Leggett have the same, and Zach Austin have the same number of 3-point attempts as Blake Hinson, that's just not a recipe for success, if you ask me. And we'll come back to Hinson and what to do with Hinson, but Bubu Carrington needs to break out of this little slump he's on. And I'm sure there will be a contention that he's not in a slump, but he has scored 23 points over the last 3 games. He had 9 in the win at Virginia, 5 against Louisville on 2 of 7 shooting. And then at Wake Forest on Tuesday night, he was 3 of 13 from the field, scored 9 points, made 1 basket inside the arc, 1 of 4 on 2-pointers, 2 of 9 on 3-pointers. He also made a free throw. That's not the kind you need more production out of Bubu Carrington. And I think he had 2 assists. Like, to me, Bubu Carrington can probably do more right now to help Pitt by setting up his teammates. I think he's a great scorer. I think he's a playmaker. I think he's a guy who can make things happen, and he can attack at all 3 levels. I think he can go to the hoop even more than he did against Wake Forest, and I don't think he really did it enough. But right now, with the bit of the slump that he's in, and I mean, you could backdate this as far as you want to go. I mean, the Notre Dame game, he was 5 of 10 from the floor, but then NC State, he was 3 of 10. Virginia was 3 of 8, Louisville 2 of 7, Wake Forest 3 of 13. Now, some of those games he was able to offset a little bit. The Virginia game, he had 8 rebounds and 6 assists. Louisville, they reversed that. He had 6 rebounds and 8 assists. The NC State game, he had 7 rebounds and 3 assists. So he's able to produce in a lot of different ways, and he's able to facilitate for his teammates in a lot of different ways. I think if he's not going to, if he's having trouble getting the ball to go in the hoop, I mean, it's probably the best way. If he's in a shooting slump right now, I don't think there's any really 2 ways around it. And if that's the case, then he needs to focus on doing the other things that he can to help the team. Last Friday, in the 3-2-1 column, one of the sections I wrote in the 3-2-1 column, and I particularly enjoyed this. I felt myself very clever for this, and quite enjoyed. I just enjoyed it. I liked it. It was the four factors of production. In economic terms, the 4 factors of production are land, labor, did I already forget it? Land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. And I kind of equated those 4, land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, to Pitt's 4 big scorers right now. Blake Hinson, Jalen Lowe, Ishmael Leggett, and Bubu Carrington. And, just sort of very loose idiot's idea of what the 4 factors of production really are. Land being sort of the most essential element. That without land, you're not going to have production. It's just not possible. You can maybe make it through with limited, elements, limited values of the other elements, the other factors, but land you must have. And Blake Hinson, they must have. Blake Hinson is the most essential element here. Labor is sort of that element that gets the work done, and it does it in a lot of different ways. And to me, that's Ishmael Leggett. He's the guy who gets it done in a lot of different ways for his team. Capital is what really sort of facilitates all of it. Capital is what kind of, you know, acquires land and enables labor. It's a facilitator, and I like that idea of Bub Carrington as a facilitator. And then entrepreneurship is sort of this secret sauce, this 27 grams or whatever you want to call it, this extra little piece that just puts everything over the top. And I felt like that was Jalen Lowe, because his performance really since the calendar changed, since the ACC schedule started, he's been outstanding. He was one of the few things going well for Pitt, at least in the first half last Tuesday night. In the last game, I should say. And so I felt like he's sort of the entrepreneurship, that secret sauce, that little extra something that puts it all over the top. But Bub Carrington, I think, fits that role of facilitator well. And Jalen Lowe distributes the ball. Ishmael Leggett will get a couple assists a game. I forget what he was averaging in the last 8 games. About 2 assists per game. But in the last 8 games prior to the Wake Forest game, Bub Carrington was averaging about 4 assists per game. And that's the kind of game he needs to play. Like, I think that's where he can help the team the most right now, because he's a threat to score at all levels. He can drive and draw attention. He can, look like he's lining up for a 3 and draw attention. And then he can capitalize on that attention that he draws because he's such a dangerous scorer. Right now, he's not scoring, though. Like right now in these last 4 games, he's not shooting well, and he's not producing. And even you go back to the Miami game, he was 2 of 11 in that game. Georgia Tech, he was great. He shot 60%. Wake Forest, the first game he was 7 of 15. The Notre Dame game he was 5 of 10. So we know he's capable of those things, but he's going to need to adjust his game. And I think until the shots start falling for him, he's going to need to adjust his game and really focus on getting the ball to his teammates and setting other guys up. And I think he can make a really positive contribution in that way if he emphasizes rebounding and assists, like the Virginia game where, he only took 8 shots, but he grabbed 8 rebounds and he had 6 assists. The Louisville game, he only had 7 field goal attempts. That's okay because he had 6 rebounds and 8 assists. That's a great game for Bub Carrington, and if you could get that kind of performance out of him, I think you're going to be in good shape because you're getting baskets for the other guys. Right now, like as I look at this team, Blake Hinson is the guy who you believe can shoot himself out of a shooting slump. I'm not sure anybody else that you necessarily want to take that approach with. I mean, to some extent, you take that with any shooter or any scorer. You just got to shoot yourself out of it. You got to shoot yourself out of the slump. Just keep firing away. And you say that to Bub Carrington. You say that to Jalen Lowe or Ishmael Leggett if they start to struggle a little bit. You don't say it to Zach Austin, I don't think. You don't say it to Will Jeffers, whoever. But Blake Hinson is really the one that you emphasize it the most. The other guys, I think you look for other ways they can contribute. Now, guys are going to have to score, but I think if Bub Carrington puts a lot of his focus on facilitating, puts maybe a little bit more of his focus on trying to look for his teammates, and not that he wasn't doing that at Wake Forest. I mean, nobody was hitting shots, so he might have made assist-worthy passes, and the basket just didn't go down. But he's good enough. He's known enough. He's a prominent presence on the scouting report that he's going to draw attention. When he dribbles inside the arc, he is going to draw attention. Eyeballs are going to go to him, and that's going to give him an opportunity to look for Jalen Lowe, to look for Blake Hinson, to look for Ishmael Leggett, to look for Guillermo Diaz-Graham, to look for Zach Austin if you want him taking those shots. Bub Carrington can drive this team. Right now, he's not doing it with the shooting. There have been times when he has been, but right now he's not. And so he has to adjust to that. And dial back the overall attempts. I know the Wake Forest game got out of control. It got out of hand, and guys were just firing up shots all over the place. I still have the stats up here. Yeah, Carrington took 7 attempts in the first half, 6 in the second half. He took 3 3-point attempts in the second half. He actually had more in the first half. He was 1 of 6 from 3 in the first half, 1 of 7 total. Actually, he took 7 attempts in the first half. 6 of them were from 3. I'm just not sure, and he made 1. I'm not sure that's Bub Carrington's game right now. It might be at some point. It might have been at earlier points of this season, but I'm not sure it's his game right now. I'm not going to sit back and say Bub Carrington is the reason they lost the Wake Forest game. The great thing about a game like that is, like, there's no one spot to blame. Yeah, but you could say it's because Blake Hinson didn't, score 40. You could say it's because Blake Hinson only had 10 points. You could say it's because Bubu Carrington didn't shoot well. You can say it's because Zach Austin decided to attempt 5 3-point shots. You could say it's because Pitt got out-rebounded. You could say it's because Pitt only made 7 field goals in the second half and shot 22%, or they missed their made one out of their first 14 attempts in the second half. I mean, you can put it on a lot of things, and you're right about all of them, and none of them are the exclusive reason, because there is no exclusive reason when you get blown out by 30. And so that's kind of what's good about it, is no, it wasn't Bubu Carrington's fault they got blown out by 30. It wasn't Zach Austin's fault they got blown out by 30. It wasn't Blake Hinson's fault they got blown out by 30. It was all of them. When Jeff Capel was asked about sort of specific things after the game, did you think there wasn't enough effort? Did you think about this, or how they defended Blake or whatever? And his answer every time was it was everything. We got killed. And almost to the point that it's so humbling that maybe you can move on from it relatively quickly. I do think this is an important point in Bubu Carrington's season, and maybe even his career, that he's going to have to sort of refocus on how he can best help his team, because I'm not sure that right now it's shooting. Now, he might come out on Saturday night and go 5 of 5 in the first half. You know what I mean? 3 of 3 from 3 and 2 of 2 inside the arc, and go to the foul line 6 times. I mean, he might be awesome. It's completely. It would not surprise me in the least, because I think he's an outstanding player. But right now, I think reflecting on how the last really 3 games have gone, he can do other things to help. And actually, the last 3 games are a good example, because you've got the Wake Forest game where he forced a lot of shots and it didn't go well. You've got the Louisville and Virginia games where he was able to really make an impact rebounding and with assists. And that's where he needs to, I'm sure it's hard to sort of manage a young person's game like that, or maybe anybody's game like that, to say, okay, you need to shoot less and pass more. But I think getting an understanding of his role and how he can help the team the most right now, on February 22nd, the game on February 24th, getting an understanding of how he can help his team the most is going to be crucial for Carrington, and it's crucial for this team bouncing back from the Wake Forest loss, getting a win over Virginia Tech, and ideally starting another little win streak here that runs through the end of the regular season. If they could do that, they're going to be, I would think, in pretty good shape for the NCAA tournament. I would think. You never know. A lot of it depends on other teams and everything like that. But I think they'll get themselves in pretty good shape for the NCAA tournament. So, yeah, Blake Hinson needs to score more. Lowe and Leggett need to be more like they have been most of the season. Bubu Carrington, I think, is the one who really needs to sort of find his best role with this team and the most impact he can make. I mean, he's arguably the most important player, I think, because of what he can do with facilitating everyone else. He's the capital, Blake Hinson's the land, Ishmael Leggett's the labor, Jalen Lowe's the entrepreneurship. Bubu Carrington is the capital. He's the one that has to facilitate and make it all go for everybody else. And I think he can be really, really good in that role. And when he becomes really, really good in that role, I think the open looks are going to come even more for him, and he's going to find even better opportunities to score, particularly inside the arc, but also maybe some outside too. So we'll see what happens on Saturday night. This team's not dead. They had a bad game. They had a terrible game. And maybe they got it out of their system. Now they're going to be ready to roll and take on the Hokies at the Peterson Event Center on Saturday night. It's like a 5:30 tip-off. We get the 9 o'clock game on Tuesday night, a 6:30 game last Saturday. I think this one's, 5:30? I mean, it's just all over the place. All over the place with the start times. But I'll be there. I think you will be too. Hopefully you will be too. And we'll all see what happens. Tomorrow we got the Morning Pitt mailbag, so make sure you tune in for that. Take your questions right now on the Between Fifth and Forbes message board at Panther-Lair.com. So if you're a Panther-Lair.com subscriber, you can join the conversation. You can ask questions, and we'll answer as many as we can on the mailbag tomorrow. So that's always something to look forward to. Like and subscribe. We appreciate that for sure. And, enjoy your Thursday. We're almost made it to the end of the week, folks. We'll have the Morning Pitt mailbag tomorrow. So have a good Thursday. We will catch up with you tomorrow to close the week out with the mailbag right here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.